What would you do if you were faced with a moment that tested your courage and compassion? One evening, an unexpected encounter led to a life-changing decision. Stay tuned to discover a story that will leave you inspired. Watch until the end and share your thoughts. What would you do in this situation? It was a quiet evening in a small American town, the kind of evening that felt calm after the bustling activities of the day. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the hues of orange and pink, and the streets were beginning to quiet down. Tom Brady, fresh off a rigorous practice session at the local stadium, stepped out into the cool evening air. His muscles ached pleasantly from the workout, and his mind was already turning toward the upcoming games. Dressed in a simple hoodie and athletic pants, Tom hoped for a quiet stroll back to his car, relishing the peace. The streets were lined with small, charming houses and quiet cafes, their warm lights spilling out onto the sidewalks. It was a picture-perfect setting for reflection, but his thoughts were soon interrupted by a sound that shattered the tranquility. Somewhere down the street, loud laughter mingled with high-pitched, pitiful whimpers. Tom paused mid-step, his instincts sharpening. The sounds were coming from a narrow alleyway up ahead, just off the main road. Curiosity and concern propelled him forward, his strides quickening as he rounded the corner. What he saw made his stomach turn. 3 young men, dressed in ragged jeans and leather jackets, were huddled around a small, scruffy dog. The animal, thin to the point of emaciation, crouched low to the ground, trembling. Its fur was matted, and one of its ears drooped unnaturally, as if injured. The men were jeering and taunting the creature, taking turns tossing small rocks at it and laughing when it flinched. One of them, a tall, wiry figure with a sneer plastered across his face, lifted his leg as if to kick the defenseless dog. Tom felt a surge of anger unlike anything he'd experienced on the field. His body moved on instinct, every ounce of his training coming into play as he broke into a sprint. His footsteps echoed down the alley, a sound that made the bullies pause and look up. The sneering man froze mid-kick, his expression shifting from amusement to alarm as Tom barreled toward them like a freight train. Without slowing down, Tom threw his shoulder into the first man, sending him sprawling onto the asphalt. The second man barely had time to react before Tom shoved him aside with enough force to send him stumbling backward into a pile of trash bags. The third, the one who had raised his leg to strike the dog, stumbled back a step, his eyes wide as recognition dawned on him. "You've got to be kidding me," the man muttered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the dog's panicked whimpers. "That's Tom Brady." Tom stood tall, his chest heaving from the exertion. His piercing gaze locked onto the trio, radiating fury. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. "Picking on something that can't fight back? That's the best you can do?" The men didn't answer, their bravado crumbling under the weight of his presence. Tom took a step forward, and they instinctively moved back, their eyes darting between him and the dog. One of them stammered something about it being just a joke, but Tom silenced him with a glare. He turned his attention to the dog crouching down to its level. The animal flinched at first, its body trembling, but Tom spoke to it softly, his voice calm and soothing. "It's okay," he murmured, reaching out a steady hand. "You're safe now." The dog hesitated, then sniffed his fingers tentatively before giving a weak wag of its tail. Encouraged, Tom gently scooped the animal into his arms, feeling how light and frail it was. He stood, cradling the dog protectively against his chest. When he looked up, the bullies were still standing there, looking unsure of what to do. "Get out of here," Tom said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And if I ever see you near another animal again, you'll regret it." That was all it took. The men scattered, their footsteps echoing as they disappeared down the alley. Tom watched them go, his jaw clenched. Once they were out of sight, he looked down at the dog in his arms. Its eyes were tired, its breathing shallow, but it seemed to relax slightly in his hold. "You're going to be okay," he said quietly. "I've got you." With that, he turned and walked back toward his car, the events of the evening playing over in his mind. The weight of the dog in his arms felt heavier than it should have, a sobering reminder of how close it had come to harm. Tom resolved then and there that he wouldn't just save this dog for the night. He would give it a chance at a better life. Tom carried the trembling dog to his car, his mind racing. The animal was frail and clearly in distress, its shallow breaths and matted fur evidence of prolonged neglect. As he placed the dog gently onto the passenger seat, he couldn't help but feel a surge of anger toward the bullies he had just confronted. He knew that anger alone wouldn't help the dog now. It needed care, food, and medical attention, and quickly. Tom glanced at the time on his phone. The nearest veterinary clinic would likely still be open, but he needed to move fast. Sliding into the driver's seat, he turned on the ignition and steered onto the quiet roads. The dog lay still, watching him with tired, wary eyes. "Hang in there, buddy," Tom said, his voice soft but firm. "We're going to get you some help." The dog's tail gave the faintest wag, a gesture that tugged at Tom's heart. It was as if the animal already knew it could trust him. The journey to the clinic felt like it took an eternity, though it was only a few miles away. When Tom pulled into the small parking lot, he saw a warm light glowing from inside the building. He scooped the dog into his arms again and hurried inside. The receptionist, a young woman with a kind face, looked up in surprise as Tom entered, but her expression quickly shifted to concern when she saw the dog. "Can I help you?" she asked, standing up from her desk. "This dog needs help," Tom said urgently. "It's malnourished and I think it's been injured. Please, can you get someone to look at him right away?" The receptionist nodded and immediately called for the veterinarian. Within moments, a middle-aged man in scrubs appeared, his demeanor calm and professional. He gestured for Tom to follow him into an examination room, where Tom carefully placed the dog onto the metal table. The vet began his assessment, checking the dog's vitals and examining its injuries with a practiced hand. "It looks like he's been through a lot," the vet said after a few minutes. "He's severely underweight and dehydrated. There are some minor wounds, but nothing that won't heal with time and care. The bigger concern is his overall health. He'll need proper nutrition and rest to recover." Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Is he going to be okay?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. "With the right treatment, he has a good chance," the vet replied. "He's resilient, but it'll take effort." Tom nodded, his determination solidifying. "Whatever it takes. I'll cover all the costs." The vet smiled slightly, perhaps recognizing Tom's face, but choosing not to comment on it. "That's good to hear. Let's start by getting him some fluids and running a few tests to make sure there are no underlying conditions. He'll need a safe, quiet place to recover. Do you have somewhere he can stay?" "Yes," Tom said without hesitation. "I'll take him home." While the vet worked, Tom stepped out into the waiting room to make a few calls. First, he contacted his assistant, explaining the situation and asking for help picking up supplies, food, bedding, and anything else the dog might need. Then, he called a local pet store to arrange for delivery of the items. By the time he returned to the examination room, The dog was resting more comfortably, an IV drip attached to his leg. "He's responding well to the fluids," the vet said. "You can take him home tonight, but he'll need to come back for follow-ups. I'll give you a list of instructions and medications." Tom thanked the vet and paid the bill, then carefully carried the dog back to his car. The drive home was quiet, the dog dozing lightly in the seat beside him. When they arrived, Tom brought him inside and set up a makeshift bed in the living room using some blankets and pillows. He placed a bowl of water nearby and sat down on the floor next to the dog, watching him as he settled into the soft bedding. "You're safe now," Tom said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you again." Over the next few hours, Tom tended to the dog, offering small amounts of food and water as instructed by the vet. He could see the animal's energy slowly returning, though it was clear it had a long road to recovery ahead. Tom decided to call him Charlie, a name that felt strong and fitting for the little fighter. As the night wore on, Tom couldn't help but reflect on the events of the evening. He had faced plenty of challenges on the football field, but this felt different. This was about more than strategy or skill. It was about compassion and doing the right thing. Watching Charlie drift off to sleep, Tom felt a sense of purpose he hadn't expected. He resolved to give this dog the best chance at a new life, no matter what it took. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of Charlie's breathing. Tom leaned back against the couch, exhaustion finally catching up to him, but his mind remained focused. This wasn't just about saving a life, it was about changing it for the better. As he closed his eyes, he knew that the real work was only just beginning. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Tom woke to the sound of soft movement nearby. He sat up quickly, his eyes darting to the corner of the living room where Charlie had spent the night. The dog was awake, stretching cautiously on his makeshift bed. His movements were slow and tentative, but there was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there the night before. Tom smiled and got up, walking over to kneel beside him. "Good morning, Charlie," he said, his voice warm. The dog's tail gave a faint wag in response, and Tom reached out to gently pat his head. It was a small sign of progress, but it filled Tom with hope. He got up and went to the kitchen, preparing a small bowl of the food the vet had recommended. Returning to the living room, he set the bowl down in front of Charlie, who sniffed it cautiously before beginning to eat. Tom watched him for a moment, then grabbed his phone to check the schedule for the day. Though he had a light practice session planned, he decided to make Charlie his priority. After sending a quick message to his coach explaining the situation, he began planning their next steps. The vet had mentioned a follow-up appointment to check on Charlie's progress, and Tom wanted to make sure they stayed on top of his recovery. A few hours later, they arrived at the veterinary clinic. Charlie seemed more alert, his head lifting to take in the sights and sounds around him. The receptionist greeted them with a warm smile, clearly pleased to see the dog doing better. Dr. Wilson, the vet who had treated Charlie the previous night, led them into an examination room and began his checkup. "You've been taking good care of him," Dr. Wilson said as he examined Charlie. "He's responding well to the fluids and the food. It's going to take time, but he's on the right track." Tom nodded, relieved. "What else can I do to help him recover?" Dr. Wilson handed Tom a list of additional recommendations, including a schedule for Charlie's medications and exercises to help him rebuild his strength. He also suggested introducing Charlie to a routine that would help him feel secure and comfortable in his new environment. Tom took notes, determined to do everything necessary. After the appointment, Tom stopped by a pet store to pick up a few more supplies: a proper bed for Charlie, toys to keep him entertained, and a sturdy leash for their walks. He also picked out a tag with Charlie's name engraved on it, attaching it to the collar he had purchased the night before. As they left the store, Tom felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing he was taking steps to give Charlie a better life. Back at home, Tom set up Charlie's new bed in a cozy corner of the living room. The dog seemed to appreciate the gesture, sniffing the bed before settling onto it with a contented sigh. Over the next few days, Tom focused on building trust with Charlie. He spent time sitting on the floor with him, speaking in a calm, reassuring tone. He took him on short walks around the neighborhood, careful not to overexert him, and gradually introduced him to new experiences. Word of Tom's rescue of Charlie began to spread, thanks to a few teammates who had seen the dog during practice. Soon, Charlie became a beloved figure among the team. Tom started bringing him to the training facility, where he quickly charmed everyone with his gentle demeanor and wagging tail. The other players took turns playing with him during breaks, and Charlie seemed to thrive on the attention. One afternoon, Tom brought Charlie to the park for a longer walk. The fresh air and open space seemed to invigorate the dog, who trotted along beside Tom with more energy than he'd shown before. They stopped under a tree to rest, and Tom watched as Charlie explored the area, his curiosity clearly growing. It was a far cry from the frightened, trembling dog he had found just days earlier. As they sat together in the shade, Tom reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. Charlie wasn't just a dog he had rescued. He had become a part of Tom's life in a way he hadn't expected. The bond they had formed was undeniable, and Tom found himself feeling grateful for the chance to make a difference. Later that evening, as they returned home, Tom received a call from the vet. Dr. Wilson had received results from some additional tests and wanted to discuss them. Tom listened carefully, relieved to hear that there were no serious underlying conditions that would complicate Charlie's recovery. It was another piece of good news in a journey that had already been filled with challenges and triumphs. Over the next week, Charlie's progress continued. His coat began to regain its sheen, and his movements grew more confident. Tom couldn't help but smile every time he saw the dog wagging his tail or enjoying a game of fetch in the yard. It was clear that Charlie was beginning to trust not just Tom, but the world around him. As the days went by, Tom realized just how much he had learned from this experience. Saving Charlie had reminded him of the importance of compassion and the power of small actions to create meaningful change. It wasn't just about giving the dog a second chance, it was about showing kindness and resilience in the face of adversity. That night, as Charlie lay curled up on his bed, Tom sat nearby, reflecting on how far they had come. He knew there was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. Charlie's recovery wasn't just a victory for the dog. It was a reminder of what it meant to care deeply and act decisively when it mattered most. Charlie's recovery marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for Tom as well. The bond they had formed during those first harrowing days deepened with time. Charlie's energy returned, and with it came a playful spirit that Tom hadn't seen before. Every morning, the dog greeted him with a wagging tail and an eager look, ready to explore the world anew. Tom, in turn, made Charlie a permanent part of his life, ensuring he had everything he needed to thrive. As the weeks went by, Charlie became a familiar face at the training facility. Tom's teammates adored him, often stopping to play with him during breaks or sneaking him treats when they thought no one was looking. Charlie, ever the loyal companion, seemed to thrive on the camaraderie and affection. His presence brought an unexpected lightness to the rigorous routines of practice, reminding everyone of the importance of small joys. One day, after a particularly grueling practice session, Tom decided to take Charlie on a longer outing. He drove them to a nearby lake, a favorite spot of his where the air was fresh and the scenery breathtaking. The lake was surrounded by lush trees and a winding path perfect for walks. As they arrived, Charlie's excitement was palpable. He barked softly, his tail wagging furiously as Tom opened the car door. "Easy there, buddy," Tom said with a chuckle, grabbing Charlie's leash. "We've got all afternoon." They started along the path, the sunlight filtering through the trees and casting dappled shadows on the ground. Charlie trotted beside Tom, his nose constantly working to take in the myriad scents of the forest. It was a perfect day, the kind that made Tom grateful for moments of peace amidst the chaos of his career. They reached a clearing where the lake stretched out before them, its surface shimmering in the sunlight. Charlie's ears perked up at the sight of ducks gliding across the water. Tom found a spot under a large oak tree and sat down, watching as Charlie explored the area. The dog seemed completely at ease, chasing after falling leaves and sniffing the ground with curiosity. It was a stark contrast to the timid, injured animal Tom had rescued. Watching Charlie now, strong and full of life, filled Tom with a deep sense of fulfillment. As the afternoon wore on, they shared a quiet moment by the water's edge. Charlie lay beside Tom, his head resting on Tom's leg as they both gazed out at the lake. The serenity of the scene was a stark reminder of how far they had come. Tom reached down to scratch behind Charlie's ears, earning a contented sigh from the dog. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" Tom said softly. Charlie wagged his tail in response as if he understood every word. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a family walking along the path. A young boy spotted Charlie and hesitated, clearly wanting to come closer, but unsure if he should. Tom noticed and gave a nod of encouragement. "You can say hi if you want," Tom said, keeping his tone warm and inviting. "Charlie's friendly." The boy approached cautiously, his parents watching from a short distance. Charlie wagged his tail and stood up, his body language calm and welcoming. The boy knelt down to pet him, and Charlie responded with a gentle lick to his hand. The boy's face lit up with a smile, and his parents soon joined them, thanking Tom for letting their son meet the dog. "He's beautiful," the mother said, her voice full of admiration. "You can tell he's well loved." Tom smiled, looking down at Charlie. "He's family now," he said simply. As the family continued on their walk, Tom felt a deep sense of gratitude. Charlie wasn't just a dog, he was a symbol of resilience, trust, and the power of second chances. Their journey together had taught Tom more than he could have imagined, reminding him of the importance of compassion and the strength it takes to make a difference. When they returned home that evening, Charlie was visibly tired from the day's adventures. He curled up in his bed with a contented sigh, his eyes closing almost immediately. Tom sat nearby, watching him with a sense of pride and peace. It wasn't just about rescuing Charlie. It was about the journey they had shared and the bond they had forged along the way. The next day, at practice, Charlie resumed his role as the team's unofficial mascot. His presence brought smiles to everyone around him, and even the coach couldn't resist giving him a scratch behind the ears. Tom, watching from a distance, couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed since that fateful night. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something far greater. As the season progressed, Tom found that having Charlie by his side made everything feel more balanced. The dog's unwavering loyalty and joyful spirit were a constant reminder of what truly mattered. Whether on the field or off, Tom carried with him the lessons he had learned from Charlie's resilience and strength. Their story became an inspiration to those who heard it, a testament to the impact one act of compassion could have. And though life continued to move forward with its challenges and victories, Tom knew that he and Charlie would face it all together. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, their bond only grew stronger, a lasting reminder of the power of kindness and the unbreakable connection between man and dog. And so, one act of kindness changed everything. What do you think about this story? Let us know in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.